That's okay.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, welcome everyone. This is the fourth day of the biodiversity mobilization, biodiversity data mobilization training workshop in Haiti. And this is the fourth day of the workshop and the third day of the series of open talks that we are live streaming on YouTube. So if you're watching the videos, you did not miss a third day in between. This is the third open talk. And we're going to look today at the Integrated Publishing Toolkit, IPT, which is a tool that allows us to publish biodiversity data through the GBIF network. So welcome everyone. I will start sharing my screen. Please let me know if you can see it.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, excellent. So as I said, today we're going to go through the steps that we need to perform to publish biodiversity data using the Integrated Publishing Toolkit. So just a reminder of the bigger scheme. We have biodiversity data, and that biodiversity data has metadata associated. And what we're going to do is put those two data and metadata into the IPT, perform a mapping to the Darwin Core standard, and create a Darwin Core archive. If you don't remember the details of these steps, please watch the previous talks about standards and how to build the Darwin Core archive. So with this scheme, once we have that publication of the data, if we are registered as a provider in GBIF, GBIF will see that we have published a new data set, will harvest it, and will show it in the GBIF portal. So this is just a reminder of the general workflow. So what is IPT? IPT is a free open source tool that we use to publish and share biodiversity data through the GBIF network. You can access the detailed description of the tool in the web address that is at the bottom of the slide. So this is how IPT looks like. In here, we see that it says test mode. This, if you have an installation of IPT that is to really publish data, you won't see. This is just an IPT that is for training. So basically, this test mode allows us to play around with the tool and learn how to use it and test different things without having that really published. So it's very useful, for example, for our exercises today, for training, etc. So the different steps that we're going to perform with IPT are: first, we're going to upload our data. Then we're going to do a mapping to the Darwin Core standard. We're going to complete all the metadata that is associated with our data set. And finally, we will publish the data. We will see each of these steps in detail. This is going to be a demo session. So I will walk you through the different steps as we go. So we're going to move now to the demo session with the tool. And I don't know if you have any questions up to now. You're welcome to ask. If not, we can just move on. Any questions before we start? Okay, I will move then on to the demo session, and for that I'm going to use a data set, and I want to show you what the data set is about, so that we can all understand what's the data about, which are the fields that we'll be dealing with, and that will help us understand how to map the different fields to the Darwin core standard within IPT. So this is a data set that we will use. I'm using here a file on Google Drive. You can have your data sets in many different formats. You can have an Excel spreadsheet. You can have your data in a sophisticated database. You can have it as Excel, as CSV, as text. It depends. So don't worry, this is just an example. We will be able to accommodate any data set that you have. So to give you a general idea of the structure of my data set or of my file here, I have a first tab. You can see it down there. That is the original data. And I have provided also mapping of the different columns to Darwin core. That is to show you in advance what we are expecting, but we will actually do the mapping on IPT. Now, let's look a little bit at the data. This data set is a plant data set. They are observations of plants in Haiti. And so we have here, if I scroll to the right, you can see probably some fields that you can recognize. There is taxonomic fields here, phylum, class, order, family, genus, etc. We have then information about the location, the coordinates here, the date in which it was collected, who or observed rather, who observed it, and we have a series of other fields that have, for example, if this species is endemic, if it's native, if it's exotic. We have the habit, if it's a tree, if it's a shrub. Mind you, these values are in French, so I kept them like this to show you that you can have your data set in whichever language you want, really. Ideally, one would be consistent across and have all the data set in one language or the other. And so we have, as I was showing, a series of fields, and here each line is a data record. It's an observation of a plant. So I want to show you briefly the preliminary mapping that we've done. And so I will go to the second tab, and in here I have put the original fields here, and I have put the corresponding Darwin core term. So you see, for example, here that there are some that map directly to Darwin core terms. I want to point this one out. The original name of this field is subgenus. However, if we go to the original data, we go here, subgenus, and really what's in this column is the specific epithet. It's not the subgenus. So really what this field should map to is specific epithet. And so we keep going on the different fields, and we see that we have mapped, for example, latitude to verbatim latitude in Darwin core. And that is because if we look at the data for the coordinates are in degrees, minutes, seconds. And so that is the field that we can map it to in Darwin core is verbatim latitude and not decimal latitude, because it's not in decimal degrees. So you see that to do the mapping, we have to look at the data. So this is an important step. We can do that here in a spreadsheet, like we just I was just showing. We look at the data and we propose a Darwin core term that would map, or we can do it on IPT, and I will show you how that is done in a moment. I also want to go to the last set of fields in the data set. These ones here, if we look at the original, in particular, for example, let's look at these two. This is the habit of the plant, and this is the IUCN threat category. And so these two fields do not have a term in Darwin core, in simple Darwin core, to map to directly. And so what we have done is to create another field that is called dynamic properties, where we have concatenated the information on those fields. And so this is in a particular format because the Darwin core term dynamic properties suggests to use that format. And so you can see that here we have the value for the habit and followed by the value for the IUCN status. So basically in this field is somewhat like a remarks field where we can capture different characteristics or facts about the record. So I wanted to give you this overview so that we can now move to IPT and understand how to do the mapping there. But remember, you can always go back to your original data and make sure that the mapping that you're performing actually reflects the data that is captured under each field. So with this in mind, I will move to IPT. So if you access the Burnett training IPT, this is the URL for it, trainingipt.burnett.org. This is an IPT that Burnett has for training purposes. And so any of you, if you want to test, to play around with your data sets and see how the mapping will be done and how you would publish, you can request us a user and we can give you access to it so that you can practice. So again, this is in test mode because it's not gonna be really published to or seen in GBIF. So what we do first is log in up here. So I will log in with my email account and my password. Okay. Okay. So this is what we see at first. So we have a home tab and we have manage resources, which allows us to manage our data sets. This tab administration, you would probably not see unless you have administration rights. So you won't see it if you log in with a normal user account. And then you have the tab about. So what we're going to do is to try to publish a data set. So what the first step is go to manage resources. In manage resources, here I can see all the data sets that have been uploaded to this IPT by different people. Since I have administrator rights, I can see them all, but you might only see the ones that you have created. So at first you would see this empty. So down here is where one starts to create a new resource. So let's start by giving it a name. This short name is just to identify it within IPT. It's not the name that will be published. And this name has to have, if you click on the information, it has to be short. And you can only use certain types of characters, alphanumeric, hyphens, or underscores. So I'm gonna call this Haiti workshop test. Okay, let's close the information. And here we can choose the type of resource that we are creating. The type of resource can be an occurrence resource, a checklist, a sampling event, metadata only, or other. In this case, since we have a data set of observations, we're going to choose occurrence. Remember, occurrence can be preserved specimens, fossil specimens, or observations, or living specimens as well. So observations, both human observations or machine observations, all those are occurrence records. So I'm going to create my resource. I push create. Okay, and so here we get to that screen that I was showing you before, where we have a spot to upload our data, another one to do the Darwin core mapping, and then to complete the metadata, and then finally to publish our data set. So we will start by choosing the data set that we want to upload. I'm gonna choose it from my computer. So once I choose it, I have to add it. I add the data set. Okay, and so it gives me this screen. I have the source name, which is the name of my file. In here, it recognizes that it has 22 columns. It tells me that it can read it just fine, which is good. And we can look at it by clicking on this little eye icon. Okay, and what do we see here? We see our data set, the one that I was showing you before. And if you know this first line, it says column 1, column 2, column 3. So it is not recognizing the headers of my data set. So to do that, we have here an option to select how many header rows the data set has. In our case, it's only 1. Now, check that if we complete this and we look at it, it still doesn't see it. So what we have to do is analyze it. So we analyze it, and now we look at it again. Okay, now it has recognized that the first line is the header, or are the headers of the columns. Okay, so one thing to take into account is that if we are working with a file that has more than one tab, like I was showing you before in the original data, we had the tab for the data and another tab that I added for the mapping, and I could have as many tabs as I want. If the original file has several tabs, in here, we have to make sure that we tell IPT which is the tab that we want to work with. In our case, we want to work with the original data tab, and we're going to forget about the second one. So we choose the first worksheet. Once we have done that, we can save. And when we save, we see here that we have added that dataset file, and that it has 141 rows and 22 columns. And if we realize that we want to change something, or we forgot about something in our choosing here, we can always edit, and we go back to that same screen. Here we can either save, cancel, or just go back to our resource. Okay, so now we have the file uploaded. So we have our data. What we have to do now is to do the Darwin core mapping. So first thing that one has to choose is which is the core that we're going to use. The core can be of 3 types, can be an occurrence core, a taxon core, typically checklists are use taxon cores, or an event core. In our case is an occurrence core. This is a set of occurrence records. So we choose the core and we add it. So once we add it, we get to this screen, and it asks us again, which is the source data. The source data is the file, the original file that we're going to map. And we're going to map the only file that we uploaded, that is our data. We don't have any other so far. So we save. We're saying, yes, use this data set. And so now comes the fun part, which is mapping to Darwin core. In here, you will see listed all the Darwin core terms that are included in the core that you selected. In this case, the occurrence core. If you had selected the taxon core, this list will be different and will only include the terms in the taxon core, which makes it much easier. If you scroll down, you see that the list of terms is quite long. So the occurrence core has a lot of terms, but on the left here, you can jump to different sections that are basically grouped by Darwin core class. So that can help us while we're mapping to navigate this page. So I will show you here first that the first field that we have is occurrence ID. And you see here that if we display this little arrow, the values in there are all the values in our original data. You see here that it says statute, pe croissant, etc. And so you see that we can choose which of our original data fields map to this term in Darwin core. You might have noticed that this already had a value. And that is because if our original data had the columns named with Darwin core terms, IPT maps them automatically. So anything that has Darwin core terms already, we will see mapped. So let's look down. For example, we had another one that was basis of record. We had dynamic properties. We had down here, if we go, for example, to the taxon part, we had scientific name, which is recognizing. We had phylum, class, order, family, etc. So all those are mapped automatically. And at the bottom, we will have columns that could not be automatically mapped. This doesn't mean that we can't map them. It means that we have to do it manually. So let's take a look at how to do mappings for different fields. So I've shown you that occurrence ID is automatically mapped. And you can see here, just down there, a set of examples of the values that are found on that field in the original data. And so this helps us to check if we're choosing the right field. So suppose instead of mapping it to that, I map it to something else. This should show me the, it's not doing it now, but it should show us here examples of the values that are in the class column in our data set, which were, I'll show you here in the data, which were these values. So let's put it back to occurrence ID, which is the correct one. And I want to show you here that, well, first that we have a lot of terms that we're not mapping and that we actually don't have in our data set. As we mentioned in the Darwin core session, you might revisit the video of that talk. You don't have to use every Darwin core term. It's not mandatory to use them all. So if you don't have it, unless it's mandatory for publishing to GBIF, we can just skip them. I'm going to show you something about the basis of record one, because this one is mandatory, as is occurrence ID for GBIF. So this was also mapped automatically. In our original data, we had a column that was basis of record. And in there, all of them were human observations. So as we see here, we see a sample of our own data, and we see that we have each different records have these values, which are all human observations. If we didn't have a basis of record column in our original data, since this field is required, we can complete it automatically. Now, this is tricky because we should only complete it automatically if all the records in our data set are the same basis of record. For example, we have all human observations, or we have all preserved specimens from a collection in a museum. If we have a mix, this doesn't work. This isn't right. So here, if we click on that icon in the, in that little book, it takes us to the vocabulary that we can use for basis of records. So these are the valid values that we could use. In our case is human observation, as we see here. So there, if it wasn't mapped to anything, because we didn't have it in our original data, we can click here and choose the one that is for every record. Remember, if you choose here human observation, it will be applied to all the records in our data set. So it's important that they all share the same basis of record. If they don't, you have to do it manually in your data set before you upload it here. So we can do it either way. In our case, we can map it to our field here, or we can choose the value. Remember to look at this little book with the definitions of each option. Okay, so we will keep going with the mapping. Here we see that there is dynamic properties already mapped. I've shown you this field before, and this one is correctly mapped. We keep going down. We don't have any of these three fields, but we do have a recorded by. I'm going to go back to the data for a second, and I'm going to show you here that we had a field that was called, or a column that was called scientist. In this case, we could not know a priori if this scientist is the person that observed the plant, or that identified the plant, or that you reference the location. So what we had to do is ask this person whether he had done all those things or not. So we asked him, and he said that he had observed and identified a specimen. So when we did the mapping here, scientists corresponded to two different Darwin core terms, which are recorded by, which captures who collected or observed the specimen, and identified by, which is the person who identified the specimen. And so we're going to map this same field, original field scientist, to both these terms. So going back to IPT, we have to choose here, recorded by corresponds to scientist in our original data here. Okay, let me go back a second to the bottom of our list where we had the fields that do not map to anything. In here, you can see that this one didn't map directly to anything, but now we're mapping it manually. So going back to recorded by, we're going to map scientist, our original field, to recorded by. Okay, we can keep going down, and we do have another field that we mapped. I'm going to show you in the original data that we have to care for. That is, this original field actually corresponds to establishment means in Darwin core. So in there, for establishment means, we have to choose the field in our original data that is called statute in this case. Okay, so we keep going down. We don't have any of these fields in our data. We pass to the organism class. We don't have any of that either. And now we go to the terms in the event class. And one that will be important is the date. For the date, we have in our original table, let me show you the original data. We have a column that is called date collected. If you look at the values that we have, these are not formatted using the ISO standard for dates. So the correct mapping of this field would be verbatim event date. So here in the IPT, event date we cannot complete because it's not in the expected format. However, we can complete verbatim event date and map it to date collected. Okay, so habitat is mapped directly. You can see here the examples of some records in our data set. These are just examples, but we check that, yeah, this is the right field to map. And we keep going down. We have now the location terms. So in here, there is something interesting. We don't have any field in the original data for country or country code. However, we do know that all these plants are from Haiti. So we could complete these fields for every record. Remember, whenever you complete this column, it's affecting every record on your data set. So we can complete Haiti there, and we can complete the country code, which I believe is HT. I'm so sorry if I got it wrong, but this should be the ISO country code. I believe it's HT. And if we knew any of the other fields, and if we knew that they apply to every record, we can complete them here as well. And so also for the higher geography, I'm just giving here the example for the country. One other field that we have in our data is the locality. However, that locality in our data set is called location. But this location corresponds to the locality. So what we're going to do is for locality, we're going to map the term original, the original name location. And we should also map it in verbatim locality because it's actually the verbatim locality. So we can map it to both. Let me go down to the list of unmapped fields because location was also one of those that were not mapped, and we just mapped them. We will see that others that are not automatically mapped are latitude and longitude. So we're going to map those now. We go back to location and we look for verbatim latitude maps, or rather latitude maps to verbatim latitude, and here longitude maps to verbatim longitude. Okay, and so we keep going down. We don't have any of this. Decimal latitude and longitude, we cannot map because we don't have that information. We have it in degrees, minutes, seconds. So it would be wrong to complete it. We keep going down. We don't have georeferencing information. We do not have geological context in this case. And we go to identification, the identification class. And here, remember that we said that the scientist, our column in our original data, scientist was both who observed and identified. So in here, we have to map our field scientist also to identified by. So the other terms, we don't have the information. And now we go to the taxon class. Again, some of the fields are automatically mapped, and we can see examples in our data. So scientific name is mapped correctly. Phylum is mapped correctly. Also class, order, family, genus. And here we have to be very careful because our original data set said genus for that column. Let's look at it again. So this one said subgenus, but really it's not. The information that it really contains is not a subgenus, but is a specific epithet. So this one is mapped automatically because the name matches, but is wrong. So this one we have to leave empty. And instead, we have to match specific epithet to our original column subgenus. Okay, so now that we've done that, you see that it's very important not only to manually map the fields that don't map out automatically, but also to check those that do map automatically, because it might be wrong. So we always have to check carefully all the mappings. Okay, so once we have done all that work, we're going to click save and we will see what happens. Let's click save. Okay, so now if we go to the bottom of the page where we have the unmapped columns, we see that we have reduced the list because some we already mapped manually, and we still have some here that are not mapped. So let's see which ones of these we can map. Record in our original data was just numbers from 1 to 141, which don't have any real meaning. It's just for working in this spreadsheet. So we're not interested in sharing that column because it's meaningless. So this one we will forget about. Now, common name we do want to provide, to share. And common name in Darwin Core matches to vernacular name. And so we go here to the Taxon class, and it's here, and we look for vernacular name, and we map it to a common name, which is here. Okay. So now if we save, it will disappear from there, from the list. Let's try that. Okay, so we go back. You see it has disappeared from the unmapped list of fields. So we're left with comments, habit, and IUCN thread status. If we look at the data in here, we're talking about this column, and this column. So as I mentioned before, these last two here, these two, we have put together into dynamic properties. So since we have already mapped dynamic properties, it's not necessary to map these two columns. So we can forget about them because they're already included here. Now about the comments one, I have not mapped it, just to show you that this one does not have a field in Darwin Core that we can map directly to. Now, one option that we have is to also put that information concatenated into dynamic properties. In this case, I haven't done it. And so my only option, since there is no direct mapping, is to leave it out. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave it out. Remember that any field that you leave out, that you don't map, is information that you're not sharing. All the fields that are not mapped will not be shared. So that means that you can have as many fields as you want in your data set. So you can have fields that are useful for your institution or for internal work in your institution, and that's fine. Those will not be shared. But also be that you will if you have fields that you cannot map and they have important information, you should be looking for some other ways to share it. Okay, so we're going to save here because I don't remember if I saved my last changes. Okay, so let's go down. Okay, so we're left with these 4 terms unmapped, these columns, which is fine. We do not want to map those because they are already taken care of. So once we've done all this mapping and we have saved it, we can go back to our resource. Okay, so we have added the mapping now. And it says here that we have mapped 22 columns. This is just a coincidence here. That is 22 and 22, because you see that there were columns that were not mapped, but there were some columns that we mapped to more than one, like the scientists we mapped to recorded by and identified by. If you want to revisit the mapping, if you made a mistake, or if you want to check, or you can always go to the edit button and you will get to that same page that we were working on, and you can make your changes, and always remember to save. You can either go to the bottom and save, or there is a shortcut here that allows you to save closer without having to scroll down. So let's go back. And you also have a little eye icon. And now if we click on it, we see here the names of the columns are Darwin core terms, are the ones that we mapped to. So for example, this one is not called, oops, sorry for that. It's not called collection date as it was in the original, but verbatim event date, because it's already mapped to the correct Darwin core term. So you can always take a look at how the mapping did, and so you can see your data and the Darwin core terms that correspond to those columns. This ID here appears as ID, but it's the occurrence ID. So we have completed the mapping step. So we're halfway done. We have uploaded our data set. We have done the mapping to Darwin core. And now comes a step that is very, very important. That is completing the metadata. To complete the metadata, you have to go here and edit. I want to point this little icon out. This means that metadata, minimal metadata, is not complete. If minimum metadata is not provided, then you will not be able to publish. So there are minimum requirements that you have to fill in this section to be able to move to the next one. So let's start adding metadata. So in this page, you will see a series of metadata sections that you can complete. There is basic metadata that you must complete. And then there is geographic coverage, taxonomic coverage, temporal coverage, keywords, associated parties, etc. We will look at them in a moment. This warning message that you see here in this IPT is because it's not registered with GBIF, the organization, just because it's a training installation. So don't worry about that warning up there. So let's start. And let's start remembering what metadata is. So metadata is information about the data set. So what we're going to provide here is the title. We're going to say who created this resource, from which organization. We're going to tell about what is the geographic coverage or scope, the taxonomic scope, the projects that are associated, if we know the methods that were used, etc. So it's all data about the data set. So let's start with the basics. The first thing that we have to do is include a title. So this title is the formal title that we want to give to our resource. In here, it automatically puts the short name. We can call it here, we can call it plants from Haiti shared by William for this workshop. So we can give it a long title. So remember that the title has to be something that is representative of the data. If you put a title that is just a short name or something that can only be understood by yourself, then it's difficult for others to know what it's about. So choose a title that is clear, concise, but clear, and that indicates really what the data set is about. So let's move to the other fields that we have to complete. Publishing organization. In this case, we don't have organizations listed because this is just for training. But if your organization is registered, you should see here your organization listed. If you have any doubts about any of these fields, you can always click the information icon that has a description of what the field is about. So then we have the type, which we chose in our very first screen. Then we have the metadata. Oh, sorry. Then let's choose the subtype. We have occurrences, and all of our records are observations. If you have a mix, you don't select any. But in this case, we have all observations. About the language. So the metadata language you can choose here means the language in which you're going to complete each of these parts. So I'm gonna complete it in English. And then separately, you can specify if the data is in a different language. In this case, in our data set, we have kind of a mix, but most of it is in French. So we can go here and choose French. So we're saying we're providing the metadata in English, but the data, we look at it here, you see the data is in French. So we can specify that for any user to know in advance. And finally, for this little part, we have an option to declare how often are we going to update this data set. So if we're going to update it every month, we choose monthly, or otherwise we have other options. I do not plan to update this, so I will choose not planned. And here is a super important thing to choose, which is the license of the data set. The options that we have to publish data through the GBIF network are three. CC-BY, that is attribution. CC-BY-NC, that is attribution non-commercial, or the public domain, that is CC0. You have to choose a license. And in doing so, it will be important that you know what your institution or organization mandates about licenses. So I invite you to get familiar with the different types of licenses and what they imply, each one. And always the recommendation is be as open as you can, because that allows people to reuse the data, both for research and for policy. So in my case, I'm going to choose to make my data set completely open. So I will put it in the public domain. And so there it displays a description of what that license means. So if I chose another one, it brings us the description and it gives us a link to read about it. So let's go back to public domain. Okay. Now that we've done those basic steps, we can add a description to our data set. So we're going to add a new paragraph, and we're going to write down this data set is meant for training purposes. You can add whatever description you want. You try to be thorough, but at the same time concise, so that people can understand what the data set is really about in the Haiti biodiversity data mobilization workshop. Okay, so that will be my description. It's not a very good one, I have to say, but you will have to complete yours depending on the data that you're sharing. You can also add new paragraphs here or remove them. And so we're moving to the parts that are about the context, the people that are associated with the creation and maintenance of this data set. So the first that we have to complete is the resource context. And if you go into the information, is the people that you should contact if you have questions or if you want more information about the oops, sorry for that, about the data set. So I'm going to add new resource contact. And in here, I'm going to put my name, my surname, my position, my organization, my city, and so on and so forth. So you can also complete your address. I'm not going to complete it. I'm going to choose my country. You can put other information here, postal code, phone, email. Let's put it like that. I don't have a home page. You can choose here to put your identifier, and then you will have to choose if your identifier is an ORC ID, Google Scholar ID, LinkedIn ID, or so on. I'm not going to complete this one because I really don't remember my ORCID by heart, but you can choose it here, and it's recommended that you complete it if you haven't. Okay, so here I added my information as the person that you should contact if you have questions about this data. If there was another person that you can contact, you can add another one here and complete the same information for that other person. I'm gonna remove it. So once we have the resource contacts, we go to the resource creators. In this case, it was me also who created this resource in here. So I'm going to copy the details that I put up here. Okay, so that makes it easier. We don't have to do it all again. If we click copy, it copies exactly the information that is in the previous section. Also, you can add other people as creators, and you would have to complete their information as well. Further down here, there is another section for metadata providers. That is, who is providing all this metadata here. This might be the same people or different people. In my case, I'm going to copy my details from the menus, from the sections above. So that's already completed. And again, I can add other people to this list of providers. So you can have as many people as you want in each of these sections, and they don't have to be the same people. For example, the resource contacts might be some person, and the creator is another person, and the metadata providers are two other separate people. So once we have completed all this, we will click save. Don't forget to click save, because if you don't, you will lose all that you have done. So when you click save, you automatically are moved to the next metadata section. You can skip all of this if you want it. The basic metadata is the only mandatory one. However, it is highly recommended that you provide as much information as you can in these other sections. So for the geographic coverage here, we can navigate the map, and we can choose, for instance, here, we can see there. And so we're going to choose Haiti, but in here, check that it says set global coverage. We're going to reduce it in order to, let's see if I can do it. Okay. We're going to move it here. Okay, this is getting clumsy, sorry. We're going to move it and move it to IT. So we can do it like that. And you see that as I move in here, it's capturing the coordinates of these four corners of the box. So I'm going to go there. We zoom in. You see that it's a box, so you cannot really adjust it very well. But it gives you more or less an idea. I will leave it at that for now. But here you can add a description. So it's giving you a maximum and minimum set of coordinates. It's saying it is within this box. But here you can add specific information that says that this is only Haiti, or you could add information about the province or the commune or whatever whatever geographic location information you have to make this geographic scope more accurate. Okay, so here I'm going to do it only from Haiti on land. So that reduces it because I'm giving it kind of a big square that contains even marine parts. But in here I'm saying no, these are only plants, and are, well, these plants are only from the land part of Haiti. If you don't want to use this little square, you can keep set global coverage. You will lose this part, and you can just put the description. And you can be as specific as you want. You can provide limit coordinates, both in latitude and longitude ranges. So keep in mind that whoever reads this description, what they want to know is, where is this data set from? So the data that it contains, where is it coming from? If you have a data set that has plants from all the country, you can be specific about just the country, or you can add saying, well, within the country, these regions are better represented than these others. You can be as specific as you want. The idea is not to repeat all the locality information in here, but rather to make a description that people can read and understand what the geographic scope is. So I'm going to save this. Okay, and it automatically went to taxonomic coverage, which is the next section. We can always go back to these ones and modify them if you click on them. So for taxonomic coverage, we can add here, and the description would be, my description is very bad because botanics is not my strength. So I'm going to put just plants here. But again, make the description as accurate as you can. And then you can add several taxa if you want to list them, or add another single taxon. So in here, you would put a list. And so, for example, you could list the families without listing the species, all the species if you want it, and you can add them one by one as well. So I'm going to keep it at this for now. Mind that you can also add other taxonomic coverage. So for example, if your data set had plants and insects, you could describe here the plants and the taxon list for the plants and add another one for the insects, so that you have it separate, it is clearer and they are not mixed up. So that's up to you and up to your data set. In this case, we only have plants, and we're going to save that information and pass to the next section, which is the temporal coverage. We can add a temporal coverage and choose if we're going to talk about a single date, a formation period, a date range, or a living time period. These ones are mostly used for paleo and zooarchaeological data. So we're going to choose a date range, and we can put here, we should look at the original data, because I really don't remember the dates. So this one do not have years, so we don't know that, but this one say 2019. We should ask the provider of this data, which are the real dates, but it's basically May and June 2019. So in here, we can choose there from 2019, May and June. If you don't know the exact dates, you can also provide a general range, so that people would know more or less in which time frame the data set is the records are applied to. Sorry. So this doesn't mean that each record is within these days. We are generally describing the data set. If you wanted the particular information for each record, you have to go look at the data set at the particular record. So this is just descriptive. We can also add other temporal coverages. So for instance, if we were sampling in 2019 and we went back the next year and the data set contains records from both years, we could add here, it is from May to June 2019 and from September to October 2020, and so on. So we can add as many temporal coverage entries as we want. I will keep only one here. And again, we save. Okay, and so we move to another one that is keywords. So if we look in here, we see the description. So there is a vocabulary that one can choose from to put keywords to our data set. So we can go to this address here and check them out. In this case, I will leave it as it is. But what this is meaning is which are the vocabularies that we're using for different aspects. So, for example, this one says keywords that describe the resource or are related to the resource is what we have to put here. And if we go to there, well, I will show you the example. Here we have the different types of a resource that we can have, which are occurrence, checklist, metadata, or other. And in here you have those in different languages. Okay, that's for the type, and for the subtype is the same. You can check the vocabulary here. So you can add also new keywords to it. So when you add a new keyword, remember here you should be referring to a vocabulary. Where are you taking the keyword from? And then you list the keywords that apply. So I'm going to remove this one. I'm going to save. And here we can add, in this other section, associated parties. This means any party that has something to do with the data set. For example, the institution that is hosting the data, we can add that information. In here, I don't have any associated parties, so it will be just me listed here. I can copy my details, or I can just leave it open. I can remove this associated party, and I can add again as many as I want. I'm gonna save this part. Actually, I'm gonna remove the associated party. You could put here, for example, the information about your museum or your herbaria if they are associated with this data set. Okay, and then we have one section that is useful for people who are working with projects, which is the project data section. For example, if you applied to a grant within the Biodiversity Information for Development program in GBIF, the BID, what we call BID, you have a project that is funded to help you to share data. And so the project data, the information about that project, you would capture here if the data set is associated with that project, of course. So in my case, I don't have any, but you could complete here the title of your project, the identifier, if it has one, which should, a description of the project, information about the funding, study area, the design of the project, and then you can add people that are involved in that project. So again, the type of information that you can enter is similar to what we were looking at before. So you have the name and a personal identifier and a role that person has. So you see here a series of roles that you can choose. There is and the owner, point of contact, publisher, programmer, and so on. And you can add, again, as many people associated to the project as you want. So I'm going to remove this person because I don't have project data. And we're going to move to the next section, which is sampling methods. In here, you can complete information about how the sampling or the observations in this case were performed. So you would say if this was part of the study, which was the extent of the study. Again, you can always go to the information icon here. You can describe the sampling. In here, you would include the sampling methods that you used. You have a spot to explain which quality control measures you took, so that you would capture in this space. And then you have a step description where you can be more specific. So you would put here the sampling description, and the step description is the details in each sampling method. So you can add all that information, and you can add other steps as well. So if you had different steps, step 1, step 2, step 3, you can add that information as well. Let's save. I don't have the sampling methods to complete here. And then we have a section about citations. So this is how the resource, that is this data set, when it gets published, how it should be cited. So this is important. So if you put a citation of your own, GBIF will override it on the dataset page. That means that GBIF will put the citation in the format that GBIF is using it, which is a valid citation format. It will do it for you. So whatever you put in here, this free text is in gbif.org is going to be overwritten, so you're not going to see it. You can turn on auto generation, and so you see this is how it would look like in the GBIF page. In this case, there is my name here, and this is very unfair because all the data was collected by was observed by William, which I should have put in the basic metadata at least. But just to show you, it will be your name, the year, the title that you gave, the full title that you gave to the data set, the version, in this case, will be version 1. I will show you how to republish. The organization, if I had it, I don't have one here, which kind of which the data set, the information of the data set and occurrence, and how to access this information with that version, this one. And in this case, it points to this training IPT. If you had a real IPT, if you were really going to publish, this would be a full IPT instance in this case. So you can generate it like that, and you will see how it will be seen in the gbif.org webpage. You can also add an identifier, and you can add bibliographic citations. So careful about this one. This one is other resources that are used or related to this one that we are creating. So for example, we could add here a citation of the identification guides or that we use to identify the plants, for example. That would be a bibliographic citation that we can add. I'm going to remove it from here. I'm going to save this, and we're almost there. It's just 3 sections more. Collections data. So this is to talk about the collection. And so here you can specify the collections that this resource is built upon. So you can add a collection, and you can add a collection identifier, and you can add a parent collection if there was one. if this resource is not part of a collection, then you don't mind this section, so we don't use it. Then we can talk about preservation methods. If you had some, these are all observations. So in this case, we don't have any preservation method, but you could choose from here if specimens are preserved in alcohol or in glycerin, or if they are pinned insects. In our case, they were all observations and this doesn't apply. And then we have curatorial units. And so you can say if these are counts or ranges of counts. I'll show you the information. So for example, you can say how many skins you have if you were in a mammal collection, for example, how many jars, how many boxes, etc. So you can say, well, I have between 2 and 3 boxes. Or you can say I have more or less 3 boxes, in which case you will do it with uncertainty. So 2 plus minus 1. In this case, we don't have these curatorial units. We don't have anything about collections because this data set does not currently belong to any particular collection. So we'll go to the last one, the almost last one, which is external links. And this allows you to put links to, for example, your web page. That will be your most probably the web page of your organization. To databases, to spreadsheets, to any other resource that you want to link here as an external link. So you have to take into account that it has to be related to this resource. So not just put your general museum webpage, but a way through which you can access this resource through that webpage. So if your data set is available through your museum website, you get that link to access this data set from the museum website, and you can share it here. So it's other ways that you can access and you can get to this resource. And then you have also other data formats that you can add. And so this one, for example, shows you here database, DOM, spreadsheets. You may have your data in different ways. So you can specify which is the format here and which is the name of the resource in that other format and how to access it via a URL. So this allows to get to the data from different sites, let's say. So you can also share that information when you publish the data set. And finally, we get to the very last section, which is additional metadata. And so here you can add other things like, well, this is automatically completed, the date when this was created and last published. You can choose a logo if you want it. You can upload a file. You can explain the purpose. You can explain how you plan to maintain this resource, and you can add any additional information about the data set that you want. Also, you can add alternative identifiers if you had them. If this resource was identified in some other way, in some other place, you can also add them here. So with that, we're done with the metadata. I know this seems very, very long, but again, the only mandatory section is the basic metadata. Of the others, you will see that many don't really apply to our data set. So when you work with your data, you will see that some of these apply and some done. So don't be scared. It's it might seem very, very long at first, but you will get used to it, and it's not that complicated. And it's, most of all, it's super important that you can share as much information as you can, because then people will look at the data set and will easily know what it's about, what is scope, and how they can use it, and if there are methods associated, which are those methods. So they help them decide or and assess decide whether to use it or not, and how, and assess if they can for their particular purposes. So it's really important that you complete as much metadata as you can. So once we are done with this, everything is saved. We're going to go back to, you see that the title has changed to the full title here. We're going to go there, back, and we have completed step number 3. And now we don't see that little icon anymore, that warning icon. That's because we are fine. We completed all the minimum metadata we needed. So we're ready to publish now. So how do we publish? We just click on this button here. So I'm going to do that. And it's going to ask me, are you sure? Yes, I am very sure. I want to publish this data set. And now it gives you a message saying, if you're publishing a new version, please specify, or do you want to specify why you are publishing a new version? So in this case, we're not publishing a new version, and nothing has changed because it's the first time we publish. So we're going to say yes, publish. And so now it's processing, and it says publishing started, publishing finished successfully. So this means the resource is published. Does it mean that we can see it in GBIF? No, we cannot see it in GBIF because our organization is not registered. So we can play as much as we want with this in this training IPT, because nothing will be seen outside of it. So here we have a series of messages, which are different steps that the publication process took. So it started generating the archive, it started writing the Darwin core data file, and it validated different things until it finished the process of publishing it. If there were any errors, you would see here in this log messages, and also in the complete publication log, where the errors occurred. In this case, everything is fine. So we will go back to our resource here. And so now we can see here that we have a current version that is 1.0 that we published today, and that we can view or download. So let's click on view. And here again, this resource has not been registered with GBIF. And in here we have all that we have completed. So we have our title, the version, and we have the description that we gave. This is the description that I gave before. And here we have a series of files that we can download. I'm going to come back to this in a moment. But going down a little bit, we have information about the data records, about the downloads. So it allows us to download the Darwin core archive, the metadata in different formats. It gives us information about the versions. So this is my first version, 1.0, published today. It has 140 records, etc. It gives us the citation for this resource, the rights. This is, you see, the license that I chose. I chose CC0. public domain. In here, we would see registration information with GBIF, keywords, and here are all the contacts that I provided. So remember that in that basic metadata section, we completed this part. We have the geographic coverage and the temporal coverage. All the rest I didn't complete, really. I didn't add any information. But if I had, I would see it listed below here. Now, going back to the top, we have here options to download different things. And I'm going to show you two things in particular. One is this one, and another one is this one. So the first one is DWC-A is the Darwin Core archive. I downloaded it. And so I'm going to show it in folder, and I'm going to open it. So if I open that file, I find here 3 different files. This one, occurrence, is my data. Is the data that we uploaded at the beginning. That is already mapped. This file is the meta file, which is describing the structure of the data. That is saying the names of the columns, for instance. And this one is the metadata file. So let's look at the meta. Oops. Well, I have to copy them first. Let me copy them first. Let me paste them here so that I can show you. Okay. Okay. There we go. So I'm going to show you the meta file. So the meta file, as we were saying, shows the structure of the data set. So you see here are the fields, the columns that are listed. So it's basis of record, dynamic properties, recorded by, habitat, country code, etc., etc., etc. So you see that this is the structure of our data, and it tells us the encoding, how the fields and lines are terminated. So it's about the structure. That is the meta file. The other file is the EML, which is the metadata. So in here, we will see all those steps that we completed, which is, for example, the title, the creator of the resource, the metadata provider, the keywords, the abstract for the data set, the geographic coverage. You see the coordinates here, the temporal coverage that we completed, and so on. All the metadata will be contained in this file. So again, there are 3 files in the Darwin Core archive, 3 basic files, which are the data, the structure, and the metadata. And if we were using Darwin Core extensions, we would see other files here, one for each extension. You can revisit what extensions are in the Darwin Core open talk that we gave a couple of days ago. Okay, so that's the Darwin Core archive. You can also download the EML alone, which is this same file for metadata, but just the metadata without having to download all together, all the package. So that's basically it. We're going to go back to our resource. And if we wanted to republish this and change some information, we could change, for example, our original data and add some records, and we would choose a new file that will replace this one. We will check that the mappings are correct, and if we have not changed the structure, that is the columns and the names of the columns, the mapping will be kept. So we can just change the file and come here and republish, and we would have a version 1.1, and if we republish a version 1.2, and so on. And finally, here we can change the visibility of the resource and add managers. When we change the visibility, we can turn it from private to public, and this means that everyone in this IPT, in this case, in this IPT instance, will be able to see it. In my case, I will keep it private, so only me. It's only available to me. And then we can add. I can add managers. In here, I have a bunch of people who are participating in this workshop, for whom I have made users in this IPT so that you can all practice. And I can add, for example, well, Anabela is a trainer in this workshop, and I can add her as a manager to this resource. So there can be many managers so that different people can work on the same resources at the same time. So Anabela now has access to this resource and can change it, can remap, can upload a new data set. Here, an enlarged data set, can republish, and so on. So she's now manager of this resource. Okay, with this, we finish with the resources. And let me tell you that this button here is to delete all that we have just done. So again, you can practice as much as you want, because there's always an option to get rid of the resource. Now, careful with this button. I'm going to go for a second back to the Manage Resource tab. So now in here, now that we have published it, we can see our resource there. The organization is not registered, the type of resource and the subtype, occurrence and observations, the number of records, the date for last modification and publication, the visibility, and the author. So you will be able to see your resources in this management tab. So with that, I want to open the floor for questions. I know this has been long. So here we go. Anyone has questions from the participants in Haiti? Well, I think we don't have them connected right now.
I kept noticing them kind of coming in and out. Hopefully they heard most of it.
We hope so. I haven't been able to track it because I was sharing my screen, but hopefully so. In any case, this will be recorded. This is being recorded. So Carly, you have all the floor for yourself if you have questions.
Yet again. Thank you, Paula. It seems pretty straightforward. I'm trying to think. That's good to know that you can just like keep updating it, and it will just be like version 1.1. So for that, you just upload your new data set, and as long as all the columns are the same, you don't really have to do anything. Just hit publish again.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Now, if you change anything in the structure, you will probably have to do all the mapping again.
Right.
But but if you keep it, it will map automatically. It's always good to check.
Yeah.
It's always good practice to check everything.
Yeah.
Yes, Paula. And another important thing that if you don't need to change nothing about the metadata, you don't must to fill all the fields again. And if you are republishing, and that is a huge amount of work that you just can make once.
Unless you need to change like the dates maybe.
If you want to change the date, you just go to that part, you change that, and you save, always save, and just that. When you make the republish, is done. But you don't must to fill again the title, the license, the metadata provider, the description. That is just keep from the previous version.
Yeah, that's so good. And if yeah, no, I think I'm good on it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Everything's clear. And if I'm starting from scratch, like building an Excel sheet that we're going to fill in our data, then I'll just use all the Darwin core terms. And that also makes it a lot simpler because you don't have to go through the whole mapping. They just kind of auto fill in as long as it recognizes it.
Yeah, you're going to
Yeah.
skip the manual mapping, but just be aware that the name of the column must be exactly the same of the Darwin core.
Right.
If you put one space, if you miss one letter, that is not going to work.
Yeah.
But and something good to do is after that automatic mapping, just go down to the page and check that you don't have any column there. If you can check that and that is okay, you know that is automatic. But and also you can check in each of the terms that you're going to have a short example how it look. Just reflecting the content of your spreadsheet.
Yeah,
It's
that's really
automatic in many parts, but it's good to use just to check because things can happen.
Yeah.
But even like that, you can republish, but if you want to be just secure that everything is okay, just a double check is good.
Yeah. Yeah, always a good idea, no matter what.
You know,
Okay.
Anna, I think something has changed in that recognition of the terms. I thought it was like you said that it has to be exactly the same name for the Darwin core term. But I noticed here when we map this one that we had scientific name and it did recognize it on
Oh
its
yeah,
own.
with the space, right?
Okay,
In
that is
here,
good. But you
yeah,
remember,
it's surprising. So this is the original name, and it did recognize it automatically.
okay, that is new because you remember that time that we tried with one spreadsheet and we can map in and was one letter that was missing in occurrence ID. That's just one less C.
With letters missing, I don't know, but here, at least for format, it's recognized.
I remember
I should check which are the rules.
I remember that John just get it because look perfect, and we just miss one C was occurrence ID with just one or not two C's, and that was terrible.
I always spell that word wrong. I always do the C's wrong.
But also,
Okay,
I think that is because it's a particular special field that the IPT needs. So
I think we have William back online.
okay, good.
William and Marie. At least they were a moment ago.
I'm gonna head out, so thank you so much.
Thank you, Carly.
All right, see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Hola,
Take care. Hi, Marie.
hola, are you here? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, we are sorry. Like our internet is like very bad today. So I just advise the other participant to follow it on YouTube so that they don't lose your presentation, and then they can just I don't know, hear the audio with our speaker right here. So now we are back. So we just hope that it stays stable. I don't know how many minutes you have left, maybe 10 minutes. So you
We have
said
some.
earlier this morning, you said you were coming back.
We have now
You said
10
you are
minutes
coming
more
back
to
this
go
afternoon
for
for the practice,
questions.
right? Uh-huh.
Can you hear me? So we have 10 minutes for questions,
Yeah, I
and then
can
we
hear you.
will stop the live streaming, and we can go to the hands-on practice, which it will not be live streamed. So if you have general questions and you want
Okay.
to share them now, that's perfectly fine.
Okay. So, okay, let me just tell everybody. No. You wanna? Okay. So we have one question.
Yes.
Okay, since today was about how to publish, right?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
I mean, today, the presentation today was about how to publish.
Yes. Yes, it's how to publish
So,
using IPT.
okay, so since we are trying to do the process of publishing, so someone asked like if it is like possible that you or you can be a mentor, or if you have like other people who could be a mentor about like being with us, through the process of publishing, like if this possible.
Yes, yes, of course. It can be us, or we can ask for help from other mentors in the GBIF Mentors Network. There is a lot of people; they're all willing to help, and there are different possibilities for publishing data. As Annabella mentioned the other day in the first talk of this series of this workshop, you can have your own IPT installation, or you can publish using the regional IPT installation, which is for Latin America and the Caribbean. And you can have your organizations endorsed via the regional node. So there are options to publish, even if you're not a GBIF member yet. You can start publishing anyway. So we can do both things at the same time in parallel. Annabella, you want to add something to that?
No, just that, and thank you for the reminder. Depend of the publisher now, from if they already have the data just for publish, we can help them or choose another person of the mentor program and make a user on the regional IPT and make all the things that you already done just now, Paula. It's
Okay.
the decision.
Okay, thank you. Any other question? Okay, San
Marie, are you still there?
Yes, I am still there. So we were, the participant would love to watch the presentation again on YouTube, just to have like, you know, better understanding. And then they will send me the question, and then I will make sure that you get them, and then you can answer. What do you think? Hello, Paula, you here?
Yes.
Did you hear what I just said?
The last thing I heard is that that everyone is going to watch the video again, and that you will gather the questions. I don't know if that was the last thing you said.
Yeah, so I have another question from someone, but I'm just gonna remind you what I just said. So the participant would like to watch the video again because they wanna try to practice while watching, because the internet was too bad, they were not able to. So they wanna have a better understanding. So they will watch it again, and then they will send me the questions, and then I will make sure that you have the questions, and then they can have the answer. So I was thinking if this is okay for you.
Yes, yes, of course. Yes.
Okay, someone has another question. He said, like, how do you link the Excel, like the data set from Excel with the IPT?
Well,
How do you
you do it by uploading the file. So suppose that you have the file in a folder here. Let me show you. So where is it? Here, exercise. So I have here my file, which is an Excel file in this case, right? So I have my Excel file, and what I do in IPT is upload it here in the section source data. I choose my file and I upload it. So I am uploading the data to this to the tool. So once I open that, and it will cancel there, it will ask me to add it, and then I can continue. So that's the only step that you have to do. You just have to upload the data set from your computer. If you have a database, we can discuss that later. You can directly connect the database, but if you just have a spreadsheet, you upload it. Is that clear? Does that answer the question?
Yes, yes. Thank you. So I have one question.
Okay.
Yeah. So I know Excel is kind of different from some other how can I say that? Some other database that we can create a database with. So is it possible to to do a mapping with Excel without any trouble?
Yes, it is possible. Here I used an Excel spreadsheet really to do the exercise, and I had no problem with the mapping. What you have to be careful with in Excel is the encoding, because sometimes when we work with Excel, we don't pay attention to the encoding, and so when we move that file to some other program, it may change it, and that means that the data will look weird. For example, you will see the accents as weird characters and so on. So what you can do is download that Excel spreadsheet that you have as a CSV, comma separated values format, and work with the CSV. But if you're working with Excel, it will work just fine. That's what we did here.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Okay. Okay, we have another question. And so someone is asking you, Mr. Theogen is asking you, is it,
est-ce que CSV a capable automatique de transformer Excel?
okay. Can the CSV be automatic when you want to transform the Excel data?
What do you mean be automatic?
Est-ce que les maps mettent Excel là en map? Est-ce que map joint extension et
Oh, okay. When you are transforming the Excel data set into a map, so will you be able to do it automatically without having to, to do it manually? When you are like uploading it.
For upload, when you upload, you can upload whichever format you want. You can do an Excel or Excel file or a CSV, and then the mapping is a separate step, and that will depend for it to be automatic or not. It will depend on the names of the columns in your data. It doesn't depend on the format. It depends on the names of the columns in your original data. So if they are already in Darwin core, the mapping will be automatic. If they are not, you will have to do it manually.
Okay, thank you. Another question. We have another question.
Okay.
I'm sorry, we'll make it quick because we have like, it's already 11. So I know you have to, turn up the live streaming. So
that's all right.
Just...
We can extend for a couple of minutes more. That's no problem.
Okay. So someone said that she saw 3 different ones. When save, upload a document. Okay, so when she is trying to save the document, she sees that there is 3 different extension.
Yep.
Okay. She sees like 2 different extensions. Like she sees that CSV, delimited, and what's the other one? Biology.
Okay, so from here, you mean? From there?
No, there is, and also CSV Macintosh and also CSV MS DOS. So which one exactly should we be using?
Just use CSV, plain CSV. But you mean when you do it from Excel? I'm not sure which step you're at. Oh, okay. So let's look at it from here then. So here, when you save us, sorry, this one is in Spanish.
When she's saving the document, I mean the data.
This is what you mean, that you have CSV, CSV Macintosh, and CSV DOS. So choose,
yes.
Choose this one. Choose CSV, just CSV. That should work.
Okay, delimited. Okay, thank you so much. So
sure,
we can stop right here. for the questions, and then after for the practicing part, we can keep going if you don't mind. So I just want to
Sure.
say thank you so much. Thank you so much for your presentation this morning. I know it was pretty hard from us because we had like very low.
Marie, can you hear me? I think we lost them again. So, well, I will stop the live streaming now. Thanks everyone, and hopefully we'll see everyone tomorrow in our last session of this Open Talk series.